Familiar with the Space Shuttle program, as he was a member of the first group of Space Shuttle astronauts to be selected in 1978. Jon McBride was a fighter pilot, carrier pilot, and test pilot for the United States Navy for 14 years before joining NASA. He was the lead chase pilot for the maiden flight of the orbiter Columbia and the pilot of the orbiter Challenger on STS-41G, a flight which deployed the Earth Radiation Budget Satellite. And he's with us today to share his perspective on today's happenings. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome astronaut Jon McBride.
Good morning, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here with you today. This is really kind of a bittersweet time for me and most of my astronaut colleagues because in one way, we're very, very pleased to have the Atlantis rolling over here as I speak to you, but kind of sad that it's the last time that a space shuttle will be on the road, moving, in the history of our space shuttle program. So it's a very special day for all of us here, a special day for you, a special day for the youngsters here to get to see this magnificent flying machine called the Atlantis. I've been working for 2 or 3 years to get this thing down here. We have a company called Delaware North Corporation, which operates the Kennedy Space Center for NASA, and we started 2 or 3 years ago the process to acquire a space shuttle. And you would think that it would be a kind of an automatic thing, wouldn't you, that Kennedy would get a space shuttle? It wasn't that way. We had to really fight tooth and nail, so to speak, for a couple of years to make sure that we got a space shuttle here at Florida, the home of the space shuttle program, where we launched and recovered each and every one of our space shuttles. So she's a special machine. Obviously, Atlantis flew the very last flight of our space shuttle program, and we're hoping to have Bo Bobko join me here in a moment. He's on the other side with a big ceremony going on. Bo was the commander of the very first flight of our space shuttle Atlantis. She's a fine machine. Flew her first flight in the early 90s, and the last flight obviously last July a year ago when we recovered her here at the Kennedy Space Center. It culminated a beautiful program called the SS, we call it the Space Transportation System, STS. Going back to STS-1, when John Young and Bob Crippen flew the first flight, there were only 2 people on board our space shuttle. We wanted to obviously prove that we could get it up there and get it back safely before we started adding crew members. So can you imagine how John and Bob felt back on April the 12th? 1981, as the space shuttle engine started and they lifted off, and I've heard John and Bob discuss this many times about looking at each other about 30 seconds before launch and say, this thing might really take off here in a couple of seconds. And it did. And they had a very successful first flight, spent 2 days in orbit in 1981, proving the concept of our space shuttle program that it could lift off, successfully fly around the Earth, and come back and make a landing. And I was very honored and happy during the launch and landing of STS-1 and that I got to fly the lead chase plane, which was high overhead Kennedy here when the shuttle Columbia lifted off. And I got to meet him 2 days later at Edwards Air Force Base when they came back after 35 orbits and made the first landing of the space shuttle in the dry lake bed in California. Why did we go there? Well, we'd never flown one of these things before. And even though we had a long runway here at Kennedy, we had never landed the space shuttle, so we wanted to take advantage of the 30,000 feet of runway at Edwards Air Force Base. So we landed at Edwards for the first 3 or 4 flights to make sure that we could get the landing parameters tweaked and perfected so that we could finally start landing our shuttles here at Kennedy Space Center. After we flew those first 4 flights with 2 people, we started adding crew members. We went to 4 crew members on flights 5 and 6, then we went to 5 crew members, and then we went to 6 crew members. And I was very honored during my career to take the first crew of 7. That's kind of turned out to be the nominal size of our space shuttle crews during the latter portion of its history, was to fly 7 people on each and every mission. But I got to take the first crew of 7, and I love to brag about I got to take the first crew with 2 women for you ladies. Sally Ride was on board for her second flight, and also joining her was Kathy Sullivan, who became the first American woman to go outside and do a EVA, we call them, or spacewalk. So it was my job as pilot to get Kathy and David Leisman into their pressure suits and check them out and allow them to go out and do their 4-hour EVA and help them come back into the cabin of the space shuttle. Also on that flight, for you Canadians, I think we had the first Canadian on my mission, Mark Gardneau. So we welcome each and every one of you. And any Aussies here today? Good day, mates. And the first Australian, Paul Scully Power. But one of the most important things in the history of our space program on this mission, you probably forgot it, first time a mountaineer from West Virginia was ever launched into space. I love to brag about that. Anyway, it was a very historic mission, and we were lucky. I'm lucky. You talk to anybody that's flown the space shuttle or flown into space about how exciting, how exhilarating, all those E words, to be able to lift off from the Kennedy Space Center, accelerate to 25 times the speed of sound in less than 8.5 minutes, less than 9 minutes. We're going 5 times every time my heart beats. I've traveled 5 miles. So you add all those things together, the exhilaration of the launch, getting into orbit, traveling around the Earth every hour and a half, living and working in zero gravity with these wonderful people that I just mentioned, and most importantly, doing some great science and research, which is what the Space Shuttle program is all about. So obviously it was one of the most monumental programs that we as Americans have ever undertaken and accomplished. So all of us are very proud. I know all of us who've gotten to fly the Space Shuttle are very proud to have had the opportunity to do that. But more importantly, and each and every one of us who've flown into space will tell each and every one of you how proud we are of the men and women behind us here at the Kennedy Space Center, the Johnson Space Center, and all the other complexes of NASA around this country and indeed around this world. So we get to fly the shuttle, that magnificent machine, and do all the science and do the spacewalks and take the photographs and talk to the presidents and all those kind of things, but we couldn't do any of that stuff if it weren't for each and every one of you and all the people here at Kennedy and the people in the control center. Probably for every person in space, there's 2,000 people on the Earth backing us up each and every moment that we're there. So with great appreciation from me and all the other folks who've flown into space from Kennedy, we really do appreciate each and every one of the people who made it possible for us to go do that magnificent thing. This Atlantis, which you're going to see here shortly, is quite a machine. I got to see her last night, parked in the vertical assembly building. It's kind of almost gets tears in my eyes to see that wonderful thing sitting over there. But we're very happy that in a few moments she's going to be coming here into the exploration park, and in a few hours from now she'll be taxied on down to her permanent home. We hope she's there for at least 100 years, who knows, but it's there for a long period of time. As soon as we taxi the Atlantis in this afternoon, the crews will start closing the door, so to speak. We obviously had to leave enough room to get our Atlantis into the building before we could close it off. Can't get the shuttle inside once the building is completed, so we did leave a little hole in the back of the building to taxi the shuttle in this afternoon. Then our people go immediately to work to close her up and encapsulate her for the remainder of her existence here on this planet Earth. So it's a happy day for all of us here in Florida that we are getting the Atlantis. We're excited about that. I know you'll be excited when you do see her, and I can't tell you how happy I am. And I'm really pleased to be. I want to introduce a very special friend of mine. I don't know how many of you know this, but we've got now 39 nations who've flown men and women into space. 40 if I count West Virginia. So we're very proud of that fact that we now have men and women from all these nations who are peacefully and cooperatively exploring space. And we're very honored to have with us here right on the front row the first and only Brazilian to fly in space, Marcos Pontes. Would you stand up, please? Thank you, Marcos. It's nice to have bom dia. Obrigado. It's very nice, and I was fortunate in my career to be the president of the astronauts and cosmonauts of this world, and we've now got, I think, slightly over 500 people in the history of our planet, which is back to 1961 when Yuri Gagarin and Alan Shepard flew. So since then, we've had about 500 more people fly from these 39 nations in many different space programs and spacecraft. But it still is a pretty small fraternity and sorority that we belong to. We're all obviously pleased and overjoyed to have had the opportunity to go up there and fly in space. I'll tell you, Marcos and all the other folks who had the opportunity to do what I've got to do will tell you the exact same thing that I just told you. We're pleased that we got to do it, but we couldn't have done it with all the thousands of people in our respective countries and space centers that make it possible for us to do that. So we hope that the Atlantis is on his way. Is she coming? Okay, are they here now? Great. We got a real special, this whole afternoon is going to be spectacular, so we're glad you're here. Coming up here soon, we've got the Lieutenant Governor of Florida is going to say a few words to you, and we've got the crew, and hopefully the first commander of the Space Shuttle, Atlantis, will show up here shortly. He's probably stuck in traffic trying to get here. We've got the crew that flew the very last flight of the Atlantis last July. And I'm going to stop talking and allow the program to proceed. So thank you very much and have a wonderful day here at Kennedy.
Right.